Kedon Slovis, Jake Retzlaff, and the rest of the BYU quarterbacks dominated a lot of the storylines during spring camp for the BYU football program. How did I evaluate how they did? Well, let's have my opinion, but let's also get an opinion from QB1 himself. An exclusive one-on-one conversation with Kedon Slovis is ahead on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, my friends? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you for checking us out, no matter if it's your first time listening to us or as our new initiative is calling you, all y'all who check us out on the daily basis and every day right here on Locked On Cougars. The hope is that all of you eventually will become everydayers and check out this podcast, whether you're watching in its video format on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify. You guys know the drill on that front. Thank you for being a part of the only daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. All right, as I mentioned in the open, we're going to talk quarterbacks today for BYU. Yesterday, we talked a lot of left tackle. Obviously, we had a conversation with Kingsley Suamataia. Also talked about the new transfer portal addition in Caleb Etienne. Well, today on the quarterback front, we're going to talk and kick off, I guess, a little bit of a series here on the podcast where we kind of evaluate where I thought things stood for BYU going into spring ball versus what I am thinking now at the conclusion of BYU spring camp. And we'll start off with the quarterbacks today. We'll get to that conversation, I promised, with Kedon Slovis here momentarily. But first thing on the quarterback situation for BYU was coming into spring ball. There was so much intrigue around this position group simply due to the fact that Kedon Slovis had been a graduate transfer into the program and essentially had been tabbed from the minute he signed with BYU as QB1. Could he ultimately live up to the billing? Could he prove that he is a guy who is capable of leading BYU into the Big 12 era? Is he capable of regaining the form that he showed in the early stages of his USC career? I think coming out of spring ball, he's answered most of those questions. I truly believe he is firmly QB1. Aaron Roderick said as much in his post-spring practice comments to the media last Friday. He said, I want to make it very clear that Kedon Slovis is our number one quarterback, and as he should be. Slovis was far and away the most consistent quarterback, and in many respects, the best ability is availability. We've talked about many times here on this podcast, is simply just being there is a big deal. The other two guys who were thought to be contenders potentially for the job are obviously junior college transfer Jake Retzlaff, who in a similar circumstance to Kedon Slovis, the question around him was, okay, could he come in and firmly entrench himself as at least the backup, if not challenge, for the number one job? Well, he was hampered due to some early issues, complications from a tonsillectomy. I actually ended up having to undergo 3 different procedures due to complications from the original procedure there with the tonsillectomy, and missed essentially half of spring ball. Came on very strong down the stretch. And in my opinion, I think he has established himself as the number 2 guy. And then Cade Fennegan, who Aaron Roderick said is neck and neck with Jake Retzlaff for that number 2 spot, had his moments early on in camp, but to me, faded as camp went along, if that makes sense. I felt like out of the gate, both Kedon Slovis and Cade Fennegan, just almost due to default for Fennegan with regards to Retzlaff being unavailable, they kind of came out of the gates firing, and Slovis maintained the level he played at more or less throughout all 15 practices based on what I had heard and also what I saw with my own eyes during media observation. Whereas, as I mentioned, once Retzlaff was cleared, it felt like he came on strong down the stretch, while Fennegan, it didn't hold up to as good as I thought he was early on in spring camp. So I think you have a very clear top 3 at quarterback. It goes, in my mind, it's Kedon Slovis 1, Jake Retzlaff number 2, and then Cade Fennegan number 3. And then after that, I think it's a jumbled mess in many respects. I think that Ryder Burton came in with a lot of aplomb as part of BYU's recruiting class alongside Kedon Slovis and Jake Retzlaff. He was the high school signee for BYU this past year. And I think Ryder Burton has got a bright future. The problem is he's similar, and I've said this about Retzlaff as well. Both of them feel like they're just a little bit too skinny right now. They need to hit the weight room a little bit more to get themselves into better shape. And once they do that, they probably are going to be guys that BYU is going to have a factor into QB races next year, the year after that, and on into the future. I really like the early returns on Ryder Burton. I will freely admit, going into spring ball, I was really down on this young man. He had I'd say how do I say this nicely? It was not a great senior season for him in high school. Now, I will also acknowledge that the offense he was running in high school at Springville is a dinosaur type offense in this day and age of football. A lot of I formation, under center, run for 60, 70% of the time, and then run a play action for Ryder Burton. It just did not fit his skill set. But BYU brought him in, and I thought he showed some flashes of what his true capability is during spring ball. The other quarterbacks on the roster, I just feel like are kind of filling space here, include Nick Billups, who was the scout team quarterback last year, Cole Hagan, the guy coming home off of a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, highly thought of player coming out of Corner Canyon High School, but he's a walk-on with the program. He got his opportunity to show things here and there, but they feel like they're just kind of picking up the scraps along the way here. So could I see a guy maybe potentially deciding to leave the program in the transfer portal during this 2-week period? Potentially, but that'll also all depend on how they feel about where they stand with the program after their exit interviews with Aaron Roderick and Kalani Sitake, and see where things stand. But I think overall, based on what I thought going into spring, like I said, I wondered how good Kedon Slovis truly could be. Could he really live up to some of the hype that we out there had put on this kid? Because I think many of us are hoping that he can get back to the level he showed during his time at USC when he was considered to be a dark horse Heisman contender. And the hope was that the Pitt, I guess, what do you call it? The situation he found himself with Pittsburgh was more of an anomaly or an aberration versus his actual future for BYU. And I think, I guess, personally speaking, that he has really shown that he can get back to doing more of what he was doing at USC. And you're going to hear him. You're going to hear him here in a minute. That was a little bit of a tongue twister, but you're going to hear him explain exactly where he thinks he stands and what he hopes to accomplish with BYU in an exclusive conversation right here on Locked On Cougars in just a few moments. Just one other quick note on this. I really do think Jake Retzlaff, just based on the half of the practices he participated in, he's got a bright future. He has got a great arm. He's got an ability to really just sling it all over the football field. I had a conversation with one of BYU's players. I believe I remember who it was actually, but it was towards the tail end of spring ball. And we were just going back and forth. And I was asking them about the different quarterbacks on the roster. And they were very high on Kedon Slovis. But the comment they made about Jake Retzlaff, he said, "Oh, you mean Mini Patty Mahomes?" That was Mini Patrick Mahomes. That was the nickname that this guy threw out there for him. And I'm not saying it's a perfect comparison, but he has some of those, how do you say it? Those gambler or playmaking traits to his game. He's got a really live arm. And I really think that Retzlaff, after this year, when Kedon Slovis figures to be the guy in BYU's first year in the Big 12 era, if you were asking me for futures bets right now, if you're like, Jake, who would you put your money on being the starting quarterback in year 2 of the Big 12 era? My money's on Jake Retzlaff. I think he is the guy that BYU is kind of tabbed as their heir apparent at the quarterback position. But I guess if you want my overall assessment of the quarterback position coming out of spring ball, I'd say stock is up. Honestly, I truly believe that. I thought about saying my stock is neutral on that, but just kind of thinking through it as I was preparing for the show, I said, well, I came out more impressed with Slovis. I was impressed with Retzlaff. Finnegan is what he is. I really liked Ryder Burton. So I guess 3 of the top 4 quarterbacks impressed me. That means stock absolutely should be up. So I guess if you're a stock aficionado, buy stock in BYU's quarterbacks right now coming out of spring ball. But only time will tell. The big test obviously will be coming up on September 2nd when BYU takes the field there at Lavelle Edwards Stadium against Sam Houston State. And we all finally get to see a real game environment for a guy like Kedon Slovis and show what he's truly capable of doing for the BYU football program. But for one, I can't wait to see it all play out. And obviously, we're all going to be able to sit back and watch it here in just 4 or 5 months' time. All right, coming up here in just a moment, as promised, Kedon Slovis, in his own words, what he thought spring ball did for him personally, what he thought he accomplished, and what he hopes to do this summer on into training camp as he gets ready for his one and only season at the helm of the BYU offense. We'll get to that conversation here in a moment. First, a word on our friends over at FanDuel. Of course, grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back. That means baseball, my friends. Major League Baseball is the best place to have some fun with this and do it with our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back right now. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Place your first bet and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you do not win. Think about that. You can bet on individual players, game by game, season-long trends. You have an over-under on the win total you're looking at for your favorite team, all of that. You can bet on anything you're looking for with regards to Major League Baseball by doing it with our friends at FanDuel. So do not miss out on your chance to get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 back when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up now. Once again, it's FanDuel.com/lockedon to check it out. That's FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Cannot thank you guys enough for your continued support of this venture. For all you everydayers, and I hope you guys will come back tomorrow. If you're not an everydayer, we're going to have a great mailbag edition of the podcast. I already actually have a number of great questions in the can we're going to address on tomorrow's show. But if you do have questions, we do a weekly feature here on the podcast. We call it a Thursday mailbag. If you got questions about BYU basketball, the transfer portal, the BYU football program coming out of spring, whatever you got, even if they're not BYU related, if you just want to have a fun question you want to lob at me and have me address on air, I'd love nothing more than to field it. Please send those in via social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Search out Locked On Cougars and drop us a note there. You can send them in via email, lockedonbyu@gmail.com. DMs on Twitter for my personal Twitter feed. You can see that on YouTube here. Jacob C. Hatch is the handle. Drop me a note there. Always appreciate you guys' interaction. And by the way, a number of you have reached out with our Everydayer initiative. Some of you guys are listening literally around the world. I've got guys listening in Hong Kong, Germany. I've got my good friend Glenn out there in the Philippines. What up, Glenn? He's been on this podcast before. Lives on that sailboat out there. There's some great folks, literally worldwide Cougar fans. The reach of Cougar Nation is literally global. I mean that sincerely, and thank you for your support. All right. As mentioned, it is time to let you guys hear from Kedon Slovis. Had a great conversation with him this past Friday. BYU, after spring ball wrapped up, they allowed us as the media corps to have what they kind of did with their media days. We're able to kind of mill around and talk to players in one-on-one or one or two, three group sessions and get some of their thoughts coming out of spring ball, obviously preparing for the summer, etc. And I had a great one-on-one conversation with Kedon Slovis. I really, really like this young man as a person. We had a great chat, and he's just a very personable guy. And that's the thing about this. I think BYU fans are going to be very impressed with how he approaches things. He is very approachable. If you ever see him out there, in my limited interactions with him, I have come away very, very impressed. But even more so than that, actually on the record, speaking about what he hopes to accomplish in a BYU uniform, well, let's get to that conversation right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Kedon, a lot of people, obviously, when you're QB1, like they said you're the starting quarterback, Aaron said it on the record, Coach Roderick, with that responsibility, you've been in that position at two different programs. Is it any different here at BYU?
Yes and no. Like you always have that kind of personal responsibility to kind of hold the standard high.
Yeah.
But also, like there's a certain level of I guess expectation that comes with the role, as did the other programs. But like I know a lot of those guys personally now. Like I know a guy like John Beck. I know Zach. I know Jaron. Steve Young doesn't know me, but I know him. Yeah. I met Detmer. Like I know all these guys. I'm probably missing a few too, but like the point is, like it's a big, storied group of quarterbacks, and like to be part of it, you kind of want to uphold the standard.
How attractive was that when you were going through the process of deciding where you were going to play? Was that part of the nice conversation?
Yeah, like you could look at it historically, but also I think just seeing what A-Rod's done with the past two quarterbacks has been super exciting for me. And that was a big sales pitch. It was like, hey, The last two guys one's in the NFL, one's about to go to the NFL, and like you'd be the next guy with the possibility to do that. So to me, it's a great opportunity, and yeah, it's super exciting.
You have never not played at the Power 5 level. You're like literally the only guy on this roster who has that distinction, because everybody else has played, whether independent or like I guess in Eddie Heckert's case, he's been FCS level.
Right.
Do you feel like that is an advantage for you because you've never known anything different?
Yeah, somewhat. Someone's asked me earlier, like, what's the difference? I was like, yeah, I don't really know.
Yeah.
But again, I'd like to think of it being like somewhat the same. Mm-hmm. It's not like anything new for me, and I feel like I can definitely help the rest of the team kind of prepare. But at the same time, I think most of the guys on the team do it the right way anyway. Mm-hmm. Even though it was an independent schedule, it wasn't like we were playing a bunch of cupcakes. Yeah. Like we were playing some Power 5 teams and some good Group of 5 teams as well. So. Again, like I think our team's prepared, but obviously I'll take any experience I can get, any chance I can.
Now you've played in the Pac-12, you played in the ACC, now you're going to play in the Big 12. What's the most exciting part about that for you?
It's exciting. I think like looking at the Big 12, like the last year at least, like I feel like any given Saturday anyone can win, and I think that's exciting. It also makes you prepare really hard, and You look at like TCU, like they almost lost to West Virginia last year, 2 completely different seasons, but like any game's a ball game, and whenever you have a chance, any single game, whether you're doing great or not having the season you want, that's always exciting, and it kind of gives you motivation. And especially our team, I think we have a great chance to run the table and have a great season. But also, I feel like we can play against every team, and we have a chance to win every single game, and that in itself says a lot.
You may have partially answered my next question, but I was going to ask you, how would you assess the readiness of this team to make the jump to the Big 12?
Yeah, I think we will be ready. There's still a lot of preparation and stuff we have to do. Still some pieces I think we'll add in the transfer portal and such, but I know these guys will be ready. I know the coaching staff's had the experience of that level of play. They'll get us ready. The strength staff will get us ready. There's no doubt in my mind we'll be ready, but like the hay's not in the barn yet. Like we still have a lot of work to do. Still have fall camp. We still have all summer, and a lot of development happens in that time period.
Now, obviously, the Big 12, everybody's excited for it. By the time you take the field again, it'll officially be official. You will be officially a member of the Big 12. What has been your, perception of the Big 12 as a player, just overall having watched games and the like?
Yeah. It's just some really good teams. I think, you obviously have, the Blue Bloods, the teams people talk about, but then, the next biggest programs probably have had more success than them almost, and I think that's something that's, exciting is, again, any given Saturday, but also all those teams and all those programs any given year can just break out, like TCU last year, Baylor in years past. Those teams, although they might not be the Blue Bloods of college football, to me they're always pretty dang good. And there's a lot more, I'm just not spacing them. But to me, all those programs have had really good runs at certain points, and again, it's exciting to kind of be a part of that schedule.
You've played a lot of football in your career, USC, Pitt, now BYU. What's left for Kedon Slovis to accomplish?
Just put together a year on my own terms, and it was funny. I was talking to John, and he kind of said this for me, but he's like, "You're the big reason you're doing this is for you," and I think that's so true. I was saying earlier too, I never got to play for a coordinator I committed to. This is the first time. Coach Roderick's the first coordinator I committed to, and we'll be able to play for this fall. I get a lot of control over the situation I'm in. Team-wise, personnel-wise, in terms of just deciding this is the team I get to play for this year. So I think for me, that's exciting for me. Just get an opportunity to play the game I love, on the team I wanted to play for, and now that I love to.
What will you be working on the most this summer?
Just building continuity of receivers, just get dialed in, and obviously, John, there's some mechanical stuff, off-platform throws, the fun throws, and all the offensive stuff, some of the protections and movements I haven't done a ton of. You can always get better at that, but to me, it's just a little bit of everything, and we'll be ready for the fall.
There you go, Kedon Slovis. A big thank you to him for taking the time. And like I said, I'm very impressed with this kid. He is humble. He knows what he's capable of doing as a football player. He's talked about the fact that this is the first time, you heard him mention it, this is the first time in his playing career that he will actually be playing for the offensive coordinator he committed to play for. When he went to USC, coordinator got changed out. When he went to Pitt, coordinator got changed out, and he was forced to kind of adapt his style to fit into the offense that was not the offense he necessarily committed to play in. This, like he said, is the first time he will ever get that opportunity to do so. And Aaron Roderick, I can tell you this much, just based on conversations we've had with Aaron during spring ball, he's been very impressed with Slovis. He's talked about the fact that Slovis has really embraced all of what BYU is all about, both the culture and the football program around the university itself. He has absolutely been everything BYU hoped he could be, it sounds like, from the time they started recruiting him. And hopefully that translates to success on the football field, but only time will tell on that front. All right, coming up here in just a moment, we'll round out today's show with a number of other notes. We got some transfer portal notes, guys leaving, guys coming in potentially via the transfer portal. Also, a quick note as well on the season ticket situation for BYU. Tom Holmoe speaking out on that. We'll get to all of that as we continue on right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, my friends. All right, time now to wrap up today's show with some of the other notes out there in BYU sports. Let's start with one that I reported yesterday. If you're following me on Twitter, I reported this via two different sources. BYU men's basketball has a transfer that came in on a visit, a transfer portal visit. just yesterday. Seamus Lukosius, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He is a former Butler guard, entered the transfer portal earlier this month, listed at 6'7", 225 pounds. He's more of a swingman just based on the film I watched of him, but he's got 2 years of eligibility remaining, so kind of more what BYU is looking for, a guy who can kind of grow with the program were he to pick BYU. He averaged 11.6 points per game this past year as the second leading scorer for the Butler Bulldogs. Also started all 32 games as well for Butler. I think this would be a very, very nice pickup if BYU can manage to land him in the transfer portal, but it's got a number of great options out there. Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, some other Big 12 programs who are after this young man. But the simple fact of the matter, he came to visit BYU, should give BYU some hope that there is at least some reciprocal interest on Lukosius's part in regards to this, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, it was fun to report that. I don't typically get a chance to beat out guys like Robbie McCombs for information like this, but when I get the opportunity, it's always kind of fun to get the scoop on that. But we'll see how it all shakes out. The transfer portal continues to roll on. BYU trying to kind of pick up the pieces now after Stephen Ashworth spurned them for Creighton. Could that mean that Dawson Baker's on his way in? Could Joe Girard be on his way? Who knows? But we'll continue to track that all on the basketball portal front. Now on the football portal front, I forgot to mention this yesterday, but Zoom Esplin, a defensive lineman from California, announced that he'll be entering the transfer portal and leaving the BYU football program. Now, great name. You cannot name a person better than Zoom Esplin. He's a very tall, long, rangy athlete. But to me, he was the simple fact of the matter, he just did not fit what BYU is trying to do on defense. He was a guy that was brought in under the Kalani Sitake regime, because Kalani Sitake is still there. He was brought in under the Ed Lamb and Elisa Tuiaki regime as a thought that they could develop him into one of those kind of longer defensive ends. Think of like a Corbin Kafusi for BYU. But he decided, you know what, in this new defense under Jay Hill, my prospects may be better suited elsewhere. And it would not surprise me, honestly, to see Zoom landing with Northern Colorado, where Ed Lamb and Preston Hadley, who Preston actually took a big part in recruiting this young man out of California. I could see him landing with the Bears, and I think the FCS level might be better suited for what Zoom Esplin's skill set is at this point. We'll see what happens, but you wish him well and hope that he can find a great spot for himself to participate. The one thing I know about him is just the conversations I talked with people about Zoom is the simple fact of the matter, he's an athlete. He is a fantastic athlete, and that should lend itself potentially to paying off down the road. But I just think that the way BYU's defense is set up right now, his skill set maybe was a little antithetical to what BYU was trying to do on defense, but you wish him the best moving forward. And I guess the one other positive, if you want to count it that way, is he was a scholarship athlete. So BYU does open up a defensive scholarship potentially to bring in a defensive lineman, which brings us to our next point, that BYU has apparently offered a scholarship to Oregon reserve defensive lineman Trevin Ma'ai. He is a guy who has spent 3 years at Oregon. He's originally from the Vegas area, played at Bishop Gorman High School down there in Vegas. I originally went to Oregon as a 240-pound defensive end, but reading up on this, my good friend Mitch Harper over at KSL Sports said that there was a story about him recently where he said he's bulked up to as high as 290 pounds, and he's embracing a lot more of playing on the interior of the defensive line, which honestly is more of what BYU needs. I feel like BYU's actually got a pretty good setup in regards to the guys they have more on the perimeter. They have a bevy of bodies there. Proven products, question mark, but they have a number of bodies there. Having proven guys who can hold on the interior of a defensive line is a big question. And Ma'ai, if he decided to pick BYU, would be an interesting pickup because he's got a number of other options out there. As a prep, he picked up offers from USC, Utah, TCU, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, among others. Since entering the portal on April 15th, he's reported offers from Baylor, West Virginia, Hawaii, Boise State. So he's got a number of suitors after him, but BYU has thrown their hat into the ring, and they already picked up AJ Vongpachon, which I think bolsters the linebacking core. I said it before in the wish list for BYU on the transfer portal front, they probably wanted one defensive lineman, one linebacker, a safety, and potentially a cornerback. Well, could Ma'ai be the defensive lineman that you've been looking for out there in the portal? Only time will tell, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there. One other note that earlier this week, BYU did offer North Texas tight end Var'Keyes Gums. You want to talk about a great name. VAR apostrophe KEYES, Var'Keyes Gums. And what I love about Var'Keyes Gums, watching his highlight reel, is he is a 6'3", 230-pound just stick of dynamite, it feels like, as a football player. He is not your traditional tight end in any sense of the word. Like I said, he's 6'3", 230 pounds. He's not Isaac Rex out there, but he is very effective at what he was doing in his 1 year at North Texas so far. he has got even more offers and bigger offers than what Trevin, my eye, has gotten in the transfer portal. And it might be a little more of a long shot for BYU to land a guy like Gums out of the transfer portal. But BYU swinging for the fences, folks. This is not BYU being like, oh, maybe we could get this guy and we'll give him an offer and see if he decides to take it. That's BYU. That mentality is out the window at BYU right now. They refuse to believe that they cannot compete for the top level athletes. BYU is embraced fully, just from the football perspective, based on what I understand. They have fully embraced the fact that they are now a Power 5 program, or will be officially on July 1st. But they've been operating as such and telling guys, hey, you're coming in here. You can help us build the early part of our Power 5 legacy. You can be a big part of that. Come in here and be part of that. Will that pitch pay off? It's paid off with AJ Vongpachon so far. We'll see if it can continue to do so. I have my question marks about how many truly 5- and 4-star athletes BYU can go out there and get, but the transfer portal, it can really, really help BYU, because a lot of guys, maybe they go to a program, realize that they want something different. They want to focus more on football, and something that BYU can offer. One other note real quick on the transfer portal front, that Caleb Etienne, the big offensive tackle from Oklahoma State, 24/7 Sports put their transfer portal grade on him. Oklahoma State fans were down on him bad. Mike Gundy was saying he got beat out. Well, if he got beat out by a very good football player, because if you believe the 24/7 portal rankings, he is a near 4-star athlete in terms of the transfer portal rankings coming to BYU. That's a pretty high honor from 24/7 Sports, who I still believe, this is my personal feeling, they are the gold standard when it comes to player evaluations right now on the transfer portal and high school recruiting front. They think he's an elite athlete and will fit in nicely at BYU. And I think that him moving to right tackle, I know that his run blocking grade was not great, but him moving to right tackle, in many respects, I think may help him be better than he was at left tackle. Left tackle is a unique position. You have so many extra responsibilities protecting the blind side of your quarterback. He has proven to be a very, very good pass protector, depending on which metric you look at. I reported he'd only given up 1 sack. I saw another thing after I finished recording yesterday's podcast. They gave up 4 sacks and 500 plus pass plays during the 2022 season. I don't care if it's 1 or 4 sacks over 500 plays. That's a minuscule percentage. That is actually really, really good as a pass protector. And BYU requires their tackles more than. Here's the thing. BYU's philosophy with their tackles is, yes, we need you to be an adequate run blocker, but we need you to be an elite pass blocker. And guess what the skill set of Kingsley Suamataia and Caleb Etienne right now are? They are elite pass blockers. They may not be the world's best run blockers. They're adequate, I feel like, in their respects. I think Kingsley is a better run blocker than a guy like Caleb is on paper right now. But the interior BYU's offensive line, those are more the road graders. Those are guys who are supposed to open the holes in that zone run scheme. The tackles, you protect the edges and keep that quarterback's jersey clean. That is your job in BYU's offense. And that may sound way too simplistic, but in many ways, that's how simplistic football can be in certain circumstances. All right, final note before we go here on today's show is that a lot of BYU fans out there have expressed some disconcerting thoughts with regards to not the transfer portal, but that's been a topic, but the season ticket situation. BYU, the way I understand it and everything that we continue to hear, they've sold out of their season ticket allotment for BYU football tickets. Now, a little bit disappointing to me personally, because I had some season tickets 2 seasons ago that I gave away to Cougar fans. And last season ran into some situations where I wasn't able to do that. I was hoping to get back on the wagon this year and do that, but they're sold out. So if I'm able to acquire a couple, we may continue that tradition, bring it back after a year hiatus. But right now, it doesn't look like that's the way it's going to go. And Tom Holmoe put out a letter saying the letter, quote, gives us some context around the why to our fan base right now about the situation with regards to season tickets. The letter reads in parts: thank you so much for all your support you do to continue to support BYU athletics. As we look forward to our first season competing in Big 12 football, we're excited to have seen so much added interest in our football program, and specifically from so many wanting tickets for the 2023 season. With our ticket base expanding, we knew there were going to be some growing pains. We realize this has been that some have been displaced from their previous seats, some have been priced out of season tickets. We have been able to provide all active Cougar members who opted in to buy season tickets the opportunity to buy tickets this season. So if you wanted to get tickets, you need to be a part of the Cougar Club, and that's what BYU's been really pushing for over the past few years. He continues to talk about the fact that, hey, simply there is there is a supply and demand issue here. And BYU, I knew this. I knew of 3 people personally that I've talked to that said once BYU finally got into a Power 5 conference, they'd actually buy season tickets. Now, I needed to check in with all 3 of those people and see if they actually pulled through on that because they talked about that in the past. But the simple fact of the matter is supply has been outpaced by demand here for BYU season tickets. And it's not surprising. The Big 12 is a new era. There's excitement for BYU. They may not be the best football program out there this fall, but there is a honeymoon period that BYU is going to get by on here early on in their Big 12 tenure, just simply due to the fact that Cougar fans are ecstatic to be a part of the Power 5 level of football. And that's why you're seeing these season tickets sell out as quickly as they have. They've already said in June the basketball tickets will go on sale, and I'm expecting those will sell out in very short order. I expect to have some very full houses, both at the house that Lavelle built at Lavelle Edwards Stadium, as well as the Marriott Center on Saturday nights coming up in the winter, because you're going to have a lot of Cougar fans out there supporting their team and a lot of Big 12 fans making the trip to Provo as well. It's a new era, folks, and you may be disappointed in that you lost maybe your seats or you didn't necessarily expect to pay as much as you did for season tickets, but you know what? In this day and age, it's supply and demand. And BYU, honestly, compared to some other Power 5 programs, tickets are still relatively a bargain. I still would have snapped up 2 tickets if I had the opportunity to do so. And hey, if you happen to have 2 end zone tickets you want to give up for the season and you want to help out some Cougar fans out here on this podcast, hit me up. I'd be happy to take them off your hands for the right price. So crazy times, but hopefully everything will work out in the end for Cougar fans. And the nice part is Big 12 football's on the way, folks, and it's going to require an increased cost from you, the fan, from BYU as an athletic department. There's just more money to be paid out, more money to be needed, all that type of stuff. But it's the new era of BYU sports, and I don't think there's a perfect solution in any way, shape, or form. I don't anticipate BYU filling in the corners anytime soon at Lavelle Edwards Stadium to get it to maybe 80,000 capacity. I don't expect them to break ground on a new stadium in the relatively near future. So I guess we'll have to make do with what we've got, at least for the time being. All right. Just some quick thoughts on that. All right. Big thank you once again to Kedon Slovis for taking the time to join us here on the podcast. And a big thank you to all of you, by the way, for making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the podcast. As mentioned, it's a mailbag edition of the podcast tomorrow. We'll also continue with our look back at each position group in BYU spring ball. I think tomorrow we'll flip over to the defense. I want to talk about the linebackers. And AJ Vongpachan obviously bolsters that lineup, but what did the linebackers look like who were actually participating in spring? We'll talk about that on tomorrow's show as well. So join us back here, same time tomorrow, whenever you happen to be listening and or watching this. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. This has been the Locked On Cougars podcast. Hope you all are doing well. We'll talk to you soon.